Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
Hey, it's me, Egbert. E-G-G-B-U-R-T. Check out my website at egbert.com. Now it's back to those two dudes who told me they would bring in big ratings. They better are their history. Here are Brad and John.
John, is everything okay at the Combest household? No roof shingles gone or windows blown out or anything like that?
You know, I haven't done a once around yet, but I'm going to as soon as we get off the air. I did a cursory look out the front and the back, and everything seems to be okay. How about you, Brad?
Little damage here, little damage there. Problems with one of our transmitter sites. But you know what? What else is new? You know what? Yeah. I'm the perfect what do you call it? Low life kind of guy, because when the tornado sirens are going off, guess where I'm at? I'm outside watching the weather. I'm not hunkered down in my basement or anything like that.
That's so dangerous, Brad. I can't. Certainly, I hope no one on a radio show has ever advocated for men to go outside and watch a tornado.
Well, yeah. Well, nowadays it's the women that go outside and watch. The men are, for the most part, hunkered down in the basement. It's the women I've got like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Look at that.
Hey, we have a beautiful women's empowerment story, a story number 1 today, Brad.
Oh, can't wait. And by the way, you're listening to John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. He puts together this list every single day, and he's done it for 22 plus years. He puts together the top stories, what he thinks are the top stories around the state as far as politics, government, sometimes even some funny kind of stuff, some weird stories and things like that. And he puts together on his website, johncombest.com. Now, if you don't know about John, John is one of these guys, sort of interesting. John loves women with comfortable shoes. Can we get a rating on that?
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Oh, Mary Elizabeth Coleman says.
Well, Brad, between us, I'd rather have him barefoot, if you know what I mean.
John doesn't like women with comfortable shoes. We've been doing the show for 4 or 5 months now. If I had to count the number of times John has mentioned comfortable shoes, it's probably at least a dozen right now. So I don't.
Well, Brad, but and to be fair, look, I haven't said this before, but to be fair, I do make fun of comfortable shoes. But on the other hand, at least they don't stab you in the ears. You know what I'm saying, Brad?
Not going to touch that.
You go to an event, you come home, a pair of comfortable shoes won't jab you in the ear. You know what I'm saying?
Not going to touch that. Okay. We have an official announcer what's your name again?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do you do again?
And here they are.
He counts them down.
In third place.
Oh, Brad, that dastardly Freedom Caucus is at it again. They were documented, and their ne'er-do-well activities have been documented by State Line, Brad. It's in the Missouri Independent today, and it's by a woman named, should have had it up. I'm sorry, Elaine Povich. Not to be confused with Maury Povich, but Elaine Povich goes through and she documents the transgressions of Missouri's Freedom Caucus. Did you know, Brad, there's not just a Freedom Caucus in Missouri. There's Freedom Caucuses in other states too, and they're causing havoc. And you know what the headline is, Brad? Here it goes. Freedom Caucuses push for conservative state laws, but getting attention is their big success. These big bunch of babies, Brad, all they want to do is get attention from the media. And who's going to go around highlighting them every day, Brad? It's disgusting if you ask me. This story is brought to you by State Line via the Missouri Independent today.
And you know what? Do you know how they do that? Do you know how they get attention?
How do they do it, Brad?
They have an official spokesperson. Have you heard of the official spokesperson of the Missouri Freedom Caucus?
No, I haven't. Who is it?
You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania.
That's him right there. I'm sorry, John.
Any good April, Brad, starts with Mary Elizabeth Coleman and Terry Bollea, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan, back to back. Thank you for that, Brad.
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
You know, Brad, next time we hang out, I'm going to grab your phone when you're not looking, and I'm going to make that your text message alert.
From you? Is that what it's going to be? So
It is, or the Frederick Roofing jingle from yesterday,
right.
because we know you're a big Frederick Roofing fan.
Well, no, I have nothing against Frederick Roofing. We'll talk about that next break. I see.
So that's a number 3 story today. I would assess it. As skim worthy. There's nothing, and when journalists decide, oh, I'm from somewhere else, I'm going to write about Missouri. They got a bunch of right wingers there. Well, there's nothing that you haven't already seen from the Missouri Independent or anything you haven't seen from the Post Disgrace or the Queer Leader or whoever.
Okay, dumb question. Isn't this Freedom Caucus thing? Isn't this like aren't there a bunch of states that have the same Freedom Caucus thing? Isn't it all over the country?
There are, yeah. And to be fair, I think that here's my take from it. It was a way for a bunch of folks nationwide to make some money and say, we will create a brand. And, the last couple of years there had been a Senate conservative caucus. And I'm sure that there were those around the country. But if you make a national brand out of it, you're able to, the positive side of it, the Freedom Caucus people would say, we're able to better coordinate and strategize, and we can get on weekly calls, and we can talk about our legislative agenda and fundraising. To me, the other upside of it for Freedom Caucus people is if you're not a member of the Freedom Caucus, but you're a political operative, there's a way to make some cash from it. The national group can kick you some money. You can have a statewide role. You can make a little more money from it. So it's really a win-win for everybody.
So it is a national organization then, right?
Yeah, there's a national organization that coordinates the state chapters, as I understand it.
Okay. Number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Another endorsement in the Wesley Bell versus Cori Bush versus Maria Chappelle-Nadal three-way dance. A liberal group called the Jewish Democratic Council threw its support behind Wesley Bell. These words, Brad, by the way, verbatim, are from Joe Holdeman from the Post-Dispatch. And it's unique, I think, that I guess it's not surprising that a Jewish group would come out in support of Wesley Bell versus Cori Bush. But Joe's column here also mentions that a couple really prominent folks in the Jewish community, which are former state senator Jill Shoup and also Rabbi Susan Talvi from the Central Reform Congregation, have come out to support Wesley Bell. And I think that's pretty big. Susan Talvi, if you don't recognize her name, she's one of those liberal activists that if a stage dad wants to put his son in a dress and prance him around, Susan Talvi's usually there to cheerlead it. So it's surprising that she would be on the opposite side of an issue from Cori Bush. But again, it does speak to the fact that the Jewish community is pretty mad at Cori Bush right now, Brad.
Interesting. And last but not least,
the number 1
fashion icon Karlie Kloss made an appearance in St. Louis yesterday, Brad. The first story you should read about this comes from your favorite reporter, Jason Rosenbaum at St. Louis Public Radio. Karlie Kloss was here officially, Brad. The official business was that the city of St. Louis named a street after her. Did you see the story yesterday, Brad?
I did not, no.
Okay. Now, uniquely, the street was actually named after her in 2019. But according to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, due to, quote, scheduling conflicts and the pandemic, unquote, she wasn't able to make it here in the last 5 years, Brad. She couldn't do a ceremony here to recognize a street named after her 5 years ago. But she did make it here in 2024. So it was nice. The Post-Dispatch has a photo gallery of it. They have, they did the gimmick where she pulled the string and the easy, Brad. She pulled the string out, and then the sheet that was hung over the sign pulled out, and it says Karlie Kloss on it. And then they had Ted Drewes. I guess Ted Drewes has named an ice cream after her. It's really strange for a woman in St. Louis City to be able to eat ice cream and not look like she's been sucking on an air hose. So that was a nice picture. And then the Post-Dispatch has various other selfies, a lot of her with Tashara Jones, some gay guy taking a selfie with Karlie and Tashara, and just a general feel-good event. She got a St. Louis City Soccer Club jersey with her name on it. So that was the feel-good thing. But that was the Post-Dispatch coverage. Rosenbaum's piece focuses on the fact that Karlie Kloss did a drive-by at the pro-choice people are doing this gimmick where you can drive through and put your signatures on on the pro-choice ballot initiative. And so she made an appearance there and talked about how important abortion is. And, so she was there to have, folks could snap a picture or two with her, which was really interesting. And it's to see a pro-choice woman, number one, be able to eat ice cream, but also most importantly, Brad, it's very rare you go to a pro-choice event and you're able to see a woman who is thin and most importantly has the ability to smile. Like there's actually pictures of Karlie Kloss smiling, Brad. When was the last time you're going to see that around a bunch of pro-choice people?
John, I thought you were heading one direction, but you threw a curve at me. I thought when you said it's very rare to see a woman, I thought you were going to say in comfortable shoes, but you didn't. So.
Now, to her credit, I have yet to scroll. I mean, I'm not a big. I mean, she's obviously a very pretty woman. Did you know that she's only 32 years old, Brad?
I'm not a big fan of hers, and quite honestly,
why is that, Brad?
Well, I'm not a fashion guy, so.
I'm not either. But when you say you're not a fan, do you mean an active dislike?
No,
I don't know anything about her.
No, I'm sort of in the same camp. It's like, okay, I'm a guy that's probably anything but fashion. I wear the same clothes all the time.
So a personal anecdote here. A lady friend of mine told me many years ago, she's like, oh my God, I'm at the gym and guess who's here? I'm like, well, who? I thought it'd be somebody I know. And she said, Karlie Kloss. And I said, did you go to school with her? Like, who is it? What is a Karlie Kloss?
Yeah, you.
And then I Googled it, and she's like, no, it's Karlie Kloss. It's whatever. And then I Googled it, and I'm like, oh, she's a model. Like, that's cool. But I would have thought she was much older, like just based on pictures and based on the fact now that I know who she is, I hear her name more often. And, she's very accomplished. These stories note that she, the gimmick where they teach coding to girls, like the girl power, we're going to get girls to suddenly change their biology and be interested in math. She does that stuff, and she does some other philanthropic stuff. But she's just been around for so long that I assume she was much older than 32.
Boy, John, you're on a real warpath this morning with women.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, let's ask a national authority what she thinks of John's comments this morning.
Our sacred airwaves.
Oh, you violated our sacred airwaves. That's Nicole Wallace.
I did. You know what, though? Just stick it out loud here, Brad. All the groups, the coordination that they should have done, though, Ted Drewes should have brought the ice cream to the pro-choice event. You see what I'm saying, Brad?
I don't see, John, here, I once again, I will come out and say, I have mixed emotions about the whole abortion thing. I mean, and can I tell you a strange little anecdote, which, believe it or not, involves radio, but I think it's sort of an interesting anecdote. Rand Paul, who is a senator from Kentucky, okay? And he was on a Kentucky radio station. He was being interviewed by a Kentucky radio morning host, sort of like what we do. And the host went off on Rand Paul because of the fact that Rand Paul is not behind this AM radio thing. If you know the whole story, because Rand Paul is a libertarian, and he says like the government doesn't need to be involved in this, right? Right. Essentially, what they're trying to do is a lot of the car manufacturers are deleting AM. And the crazy thing about it is, it's not like they have to do anything special. Matter of fact, the interesting story is Ford has done a 180, and Ford has done a 180 that if you have a quote-unquote connected car, they can just send a update over the internet, over Wi-Fi, over the cellular network, whatever, and bango boingo, your car gets AM radio now. And most of them, and it's what they call firmware enabled. So in other words, everything's in the radio. It's all there, but it's not turned on. Matter of fact,
and let me interrupt. I interrupted you. You were talking about how this relates to the pro-choice conversation.
Well, the radio host sort of went off on Rand Paul about the fact that why aren't you behind this? And Rand Paul said, you Republicans, I mean, once again, I think he was a Republican, but he says, you Republicans are all the same. You want government out of your lives unless it's something that involves you personally, then it becomes a deal that you want the government involved in. Now, to a certain extent, I sort of agree with Rand Paul because that's where my libertarian viewpoint sort of is. And I guess what bothers me even more so about what's going on, there's been all sorts of stuff in the last couple of days about this crazy stuff with the emissions and the fact that by such and such a date, 80% of the cars have to be all electric. And matter of fact, interesting thing, I heard a discussion yesterday with a bunch of truck drivers talking about the fact that, and once again, you get the real scoop when you listen to people who do it every day. You know what I mean? A guy who's
I know what you mean.
driving a truck every single day. And one of the guys who talked about this said that he typically gets 1,200 miles between fuel stops on his truck. And you think, oh, that's long, but they've got big monstrous fuel tanks, okay? He says it typically takes him anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes to refuel if he's just in a hurry. He can just pull in, I don't know if you've ever seen it before. A lot of the truck stops have fuel, the fuel hoses on both sides so that most of the trucks have, dual saddle tanks, one on each side. So he can essentially fill both tanks at the same time. He said right now the current Tesla tractor, or the tractor trailer, the big truck that pulls the trailers, is only rated at 400 miles, and in the supercharger mode, it can be recharged in an hour and 15 minutes. And he says it takes 1 megawatt of electricity to charge at that rate. Now, 1 megawatt is 1 million watts. Now, let's think about this for a minute. If you've been on the roads and you drive around a while, you see truck stops, you see the Loves, and you see the places like that. Typically, where do you see them? What part of the country do you see them?
Oh, in a rural area.
Exactly. Where?
Yeah, you're not going to find one you're not going to find one on Carly Kloss Carjacking Way.
Right. Well, you see them in the rural areas where, guess what? There's not a lot of electricity out there. Matter of fact, a lot of the areas are still, matter of fact, here in the St. Louis area, and in parts of St. Charles County, I don't know if you know this or not, people still get their electric. Matter of fact, Shelley talked about this all the time. Shelley is on the Quiver River Electric Cooperative. It's a co-op that dates back
it goes up to Troy. I'm familiar with that.
Right. It dates back to the 30s and 40s. So in other words, they don't have a lot of capacity. So let's say, like this truck driver said, it takes 1 megawatt of energy to fast charge one of the Tesla trucks. Okay, how many times when you drive by a truck stop, how many fuel lines do you see typically? I mean, I'm not going to ask you for an exact number, but do you see 2, or do you see like 8 or 10 or 12?
More. Yeah, you see more.
Right. So they're going to pull, like, if they're all charging at the same time, 12 megawatts of electricity. I mean, out in the middle of nowhere. It's like,
now, see, but Brad, if I put my liberal hat on and I put a cuck face on and I get a pot belly and I wear a shirt that says respect women, I say, this is ever the more reason, Brad, why the federal government needs to continue investing in clean energy, because we need, along I-70 and along other interstates, we need charging stations. That's why we must invest in this, Brad. It's not there now.
I'll never understand, and this is sort of what drove my dad nuts. My dad was a civil engineer. My dad was a very practical man. My dad would look, matter of fact, every time I run into an architect, I'll always give my dad's quote. My dad would always be mad about architects because my dad would say they design all this crazy blankety blank and then they want us to make it work. The idea being is they have all these crazy designs, but it may look great on an architect's rendering, but yet you got to structurally make it to the point where it won't fall over.
Of course.
That kind of thing. And it's, to me, it's there. You hear so many things like this, and it's to the point where now, they're talking about, the tailpipe emissions and this and that. It's like, okay. And the crazy.
Well, Brad, I mean, you highlight there the conflict that your dad shows between engineers and architects. What about in my old world, it was the idea between sales and the people that actually deliver the product. So sales being the Biden administration and green energy advocates say, we're going to have the story today from the Columbia Missourian, Brad. Columbia said in 2019, we're going to be 100% renewable by 2030. And then here in 2024, they say, kind of not workable. We're not even close to being on the path. So you can promise all this stuff, but then you actually got to find a way to make it work. But again, Brad, the answer from the liberal folks is going to be, yes, but that's why we need to spend more money, Brad.
John, what is the current federal budget? $7 trillion or some crazy?
It's not enough without green energy.
And I don't know if this is true or not. I read something yesterday, just was glossing over something, and it said that of the budget, 70% is giveaways, is like various programs and things like that.
Entitlements, yeah.
Yeah, entitlements. And there was one where I read yesterday, there's like $400 million in the budget, which the thing they just passed for border protection, but it's like in Jordan, it's like okay,
of course it is,
what are we
Brad.
doing giving Jordan $400 million for border protection?
Yes, but Brad, with the butterfly theory, if a butterfly flaps its wings in Jordan, it can move the sand and move the water, and it could affect a child here in St. Louis on Carly Kloss Way.
John is in rare form, but you know what's good? The fact that he is John.
You're not Ric Flair.
That's what's good about it.
That's true. I am not the multi-time NWA heavyweight champion. And that's National Wrestling Alliance, not the other NWA, Brad. We can't say that thanks to the FCC.
Now, can we get a general ruling on the first segment of the show?
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Okay, we've got to.
Hey, that's one of the 33 candidates for Secretary of State, Brad. Don't get lippy with her.
And my next break, I'll talk about one of my favorite days of the year, April 1st, and how I got myself in trouble on numerous occasions.
Yes, I love it.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T. John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?